of Flinders University. He was appointed as Vice-Chancellor at the beginning of 2015 and has come to us from, he spent a couple of years in Murdoch University, and then prior to that was in Manchester in the UK. Colin is, by his professional background, is a geneticist, and he was regaling me earlier with the fact that he could potentially spend a good 20 minutes talking to you about genetics and about the. In fact, I might even get you to repeat that issue you were mentioning to me, Colin, about the amount of DNA in human cells and and how our DNA could go around the globe many times. So anyway, he can help you on genetics if you're interested. But he's come here today really to talk to us about Flinders University and about the growth of what is South Australia's fastest growing university. It is, and in particular, its relationship with the old Mitsubishi precinct down at Tonsley, and the redevelopment of the Tonsley precinct, and what that means for potentially the future of innovative industries in South Australia, and the links that they can make with Flinders University. So would you please welcome Professor Colin Stirling.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you all for that. For the welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honour to be here in Adelaide, have the opportunity to speak to you as the 8th Vice-Chancellor of Flinders University, and especially in this, our 50th year. So Flinders was founded in 1966, and so we're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year, and it's a fantastic opportunity for us to look back. Thank you. Now, I'll do what I used to do when I was lecturing. I'll ask, can you hear me at the back? Now, of course, you can't. So can you, I'm sorry, my voice is probably a little bit weaker than normal today because I'm afraid I'm suffering from a bit of a cold. But can you hear me now? Excellent. I shall now stay closer to the microphone. I thought I'd start by giving you a little bit of a potted history, tell you how I got myself involved in the management of universities. And then I'll speak a little bit about some of the things that we've been doing at Flinders to give you a sense of where we presently are, where we're going, and as Stephen mentioned, I'll close with some comments around the opportunities that we have at the Tonsley site in southern Adelaide. I grew up in Scotland, as you've heard. I grew up just outside Edinburgh. I studied in Edinburgh, later in Glasgow. And then after my education, went off to the United States and spent a couple of years in Northern California at the University of California, Berkeley. Lovely part of the world to live. San Francisco's a beautiful location. But I think I always knew that I'd be leaving there. I find the place was ever so slightly insular. And just to give you an example, and this is a completely true story, no word of exaggeration. When I was living in America, I'd been there for about a year, and we went for dinner one day. I think it was a New Year's Eve in a small town called Mendocino, just up on the coast of California, just north of San Francisco. And we're sitting having dinner, being served by a lovely young waitress. She spotted, as you probably have, that I had a bit of an accent. So she asked me where I was from, and I said I was from Scotland. She said she thought that was really neat. She then said, how long have you been in the States? And I said, well, I've been here almost exactly a year. And she said, wow, your English is amazing. For someone who's only been here a year. Now, I was so astonished that all I could say was thanks. So I then went on and spent 20 years living in Manchester in the north of England, where I became an avid Manchester United fan, and if any of you in the room happen to be United fans, I tell you this only because you all know that it's so that you realize that at least over these last 3 years I've suffered too, because it's not been a particularly productive time. But I spent a great period of my life at the University of Manchester, And there I was an academic, professor of genetics, as Stephen mentioned, researching and teaching and having a fantastic career, very much enjoying the job that I was doing. But I realized that I wanted to do a little bit more. And I guess, why did I get into management? Well, I got into management and leadership at the University of Manchester. When I left, I was vice president of the university, the largest university in the UK. And the reason I got involved was because we used to sit around in the coffee room at work at the university, perhaps in the pub having a beer on a Friday afternoon, and I would be sitting with my colleagues and everyone was complaining about how badly run the place was. And eventually I thought, well, you can only complain about it for so long. There comes a point where you actually get the management that you deserve. And so I thought, well, rather than just complaining about it, I should get myself involved. And so I did, and worked my way up through those ranks. And then, to my delight, a few years later, or 5 years ago, I got a call asking if I was interested in moving to Perth in Western Australia. And we did, and have never looked back. It's been a fantastic move here. But through a career, I feel in my career that I've never done a day's work in my life. And I say that, perhaps I should say, until I move to Flinders, because I've got a Deputy Chancellor sitting in front of me. But when I talk to people about Flinders, I like to start by asking you a question that I'd like you to answer in your heads. Now, some of you will have seen our recent advertising, so you'll know the answer, but in case some of you haven't seen that advertising, the question I ask you to answer in your heads is, where do you think Flinders sits in the pantheon of the world's universities? If you were to pick a quartile that we were ranked in according to the world's universities, would we be in the bottom quartile, the third quartile, the second quartile, or the top quartile? And of course the answer is the top. I wouldn't ask a question if it wasn't the top. But actually, we're in the top 2%. The top 2% of the world's universities. So that's the top 300 or so universities globally. So we are performing at a very high standard in terms of research, also in terms of our teaching. We started, as I said, in 1966, at a time when we had 90 staff and 400 students. Stephen, I think you were one of those 400. Today, we have some 26,000 students at Flinders and over nearly 3,000 staff. So the place is, the university is very different today to the one that it was in 1966. Those are only a few of our recent statistics, and I think the presentation will be available for people to review at your leisure. But can I also just say that are any Flinders alumni in the room? There's a few. Welcome. We have recently been investing quite a lot in our campus. This is the student plaza. This is what used to be this is our new plaza with a student hub. We have spent $60 million on a student learning facility, social facilities with catering and so forth for our students, and it's proving extremely popular and a huge impact on the student experience. Oops. We've also invested, as Stephen mentioned, some $120 million at Tonsley, and have built there an iconic building which houses our School of Computer Science, Engineering and Maths. And in that building, we are concentrating our efforts in terms of interaction and partnering with business, especially with small business, and especially in the areas of advanced manufacturing. We have some world-leading experts there who are researching in the areas of medical devices, the sorts of medical devices that keep people out of hospital, the sorts of things that allow people to enjoy an independent older age, where they no longer need to spend time in primary health care. And that's a multi-billion-dollar global market that we would hope that those researchers will be able to tap into. We have recently launched our new strategic plan. It's entitled Making a Difference. Making a difference is a very personal theme of my own. Through my research, my teaching, through leadership, I see no point in endeavoring to do anything unless you are attempting to make a difference in the world. And so making a difference for Flinders involves us striving to be a leader in an international leader in research, reaching the top 1% in the world. That would be the top 10 in Australian universities, but also to be a leader in contemporary education, and also the source of Australia's most enterprising graduates. And I'll mention a few of those points in a moment. Now, when I said that we're in the top 2%, we're striving for the top 1%, the Australian sector is a very strong sector in research terms. Half of Australian universities actually sit in the top 500 universities in the world. That's a remarkable statistic and a remarkable feat. And I'll mention some other elements of the higher education sector which I think are extremely important as we're entering this election season. But it's a very different world that we live in today to the one that many of us, including myself, went to university as students. This slide is just a reminder of the pace of change. It took 75 years for the telephone to reach 50 million people. It took 38 years for the radio to reach 50 million people. And it took 13 years for the television. But if you go down that chart, as you get to the bottom, it took 35 days for apps like Angry Birds to now reach those same sorts of numbers. This is telling us that the world, technology now has completely transformed the world of knowledge and of information. You no longer go to university to be informed of knowledge, as used to be the case. Instead, you access it on one of these in the blinking of an eye. Lectures used to be a format of conveying of knowledge. It's no longer required because when the lecture was invented, it was invented pre the printing press. Literally, the lecturer would stand at the front of the room and read out from the only copy of the book, and literally students would transcribe the content so that they'd have their own volume of that information. Of course, the world is a very, very different place. You can now get an app on your phone called PhotoMath. It gives you access to a mathematical calculator, but not one where you do your own mathematics. In fact, you just use your camera to take a picture of a mathematical equation, and it solves it for you. PhotoMath, it's free. Someone sent me a video of it on Facebook, and I thought it was a joke. So as soon as I got out of bed, I downloaded the app, and I tried it. The video I was shown was a guy checking his son's maths homework. And he was just going, yep, yep, yep. And in real time, at that speed, it solves mathematical equations for you. What that's telling us is the way that we teach in universities, the way that we deal with knowledge in our new knowledge economy has to transform. But what we're also doing is seeking to develop entrepreneurs through the university. We have something that I'm very proud of called the New Venture Institute. The New Venture Institute has been running now at Flinders for almost 2 years. And in that time, it's taking students and members of the public who have an idea for a company, for a product, and is helping them develop that idea into a business plan and into a company. And in that time at Tonsley, we've now we've now helped those students set up 136 startup companies. Now, some of those are already attracting investment. Some of those are already creating full-time real jobs down at Tonsley. That's something that we're striving to increase and to spread to as many of our students as possible. And very briefly, just to emphasize, I said that the Australian sector is very successful in research terms, and we are. Half of Australian universities are in the top 500 in the world. That's, as I've said, a remarkable achievement if you compare it nationally. But we're also a hugely successful industry. This is the growth in billions of dollars of the export earnings. People don't tend to think of higher education as being an export industry, but it's a source of international revenue. We export education. International students come to Australia, they're educated in Australia, they pay for education in Australia, and mostly they go home and have fantastic careers overseas. The Australian education industry earned nearly $19 billion in 2009, and that continues to grow. Education, international education, is the third largest export industry in 2009, set third only to iron ore and coal. And in fact, as you might imagine, we're probably overtaking one of those. This is a phenomenal, I think, achievement for an industry. And for example, we have a present government whose projections are to cut funding to universities by 20%. We may be happy to discuss the implications of the deregulation of fees that have been that's been a source of discussion for the last few months and 18 months or so. But I think cutting 20% of funding to an industry that actually brings in that level of international revenue strikes me as something that wouldn't be even contemplated for the iron ore or the coal industry. And in fact, if one compares again where the standing of Australia relative to those other universities, relative to other countries, Australia's this bar here. We have the highest percentage of students being educated in our universities who are international of any of those countries listed, any of those OECD countries listed. So again, I'd make the point only that higher education in Australia is a hugely successful industry that's really delivering not just international billions of dollars, but of course delivering in terms of knowledge discovery, of research, and of course education, and the importance of the graduates that leave our universities and take up and contribute to our economy. And this is just to emphasize that that's a growing market. These numbers are a little bit old now, but these are the 2011 data from UNESCO, indicating that in 2011 we had about 4.3 million students studying overseas around the world. And by 2020, that's predicted to be 7 million. So this is a market that is expanding at pace. Now, I've mentioned Tonsley a couple of times, and a couple of those strands will come together in just a moment. But this illustrates, this is Southern Adelaide. Flinders University is just at the edge of the screen here, Flinders Medical Centre. You can see here, this is the path of the upgraded South Road. These slides are taken from the Department of Transport and Infrastructure website, something that I've been lobbying the DIPTI for some months now around this particular upgrade to this road. But here you see the old Mitsubishi site. This is the main assembly building, the roof of what was the main assembly building, and Flinders building at Tonsley is this structure here, with an option to build another two adjacent to it in this location. Under this structure, we also have some pods where we have heavy engineering that we teach to our students. We have a marine a submarine pool where we test autonomous submarine vehicles for their autonomous capabilities. At that site, we now have some 1,000 students in our facilities down here, and we're seeking to expand that. But what was announced just before Christmas by the state government was a plan to extend the Tonsley rail line to Flinders Medical Centre. And the Prime Minister, it's a jointly funded project between state government and federal government. It's an $83 million project. And they have now, the Prime Minister visited Tonsley on the 13th of last month and announced the formal federal funding for that project. This train extension will bring a train line which currently terminates here in Tonsley, bring it to the university. And this is a huge step forward for the institution because it connects us to the CBD by train. It means that we can address some of our transport issues. It means that we can address some of the parking issues on the campus and so forth. But critically, it also connects us across what is now going to be a very substantial freeway. And just to give you an idea, that's how big the new South Road is actually going to be. This is not the sort of structure that people will very readily be walking across. And so this new train connection, which comes, by the way, with a pedestrian and cycle route adjacent to it, is a huge opportunity for us. It connects, as I've said, Flinders to the city, and that's a huge attractor for those international students. International students want to live close to university, they want to live close to where they study, close to their classes, but they also want to live close to amenity, and they want to live in easy transport to a major CBD. So what we have is now a train that's going to land at a new station at Flinders, adjacent to what are a couple of our several sporting ovals. And some of you in the room will already perhaps have seen the opportunity that exists for us. And we see this train development as a catalyst to develop now this, what is effectively a greenfield site of university land, where we are now in the process of planning a new urban village down at Flinders, which is adjacent to the train station. It's going to be an urban village that will accommodate several thousand of our international students and out-of-state and regional and rural students. It'll be a place that provides amenity to those residents, that therefore provides amenity to the other residents of the adjacent suburbs. And if any of you are familiar with this part of Adelaide, you'll know that there's not an awful lot around in terms of amenities, and many of those that did exist that were close to the Flinders Medical Centre, they've already been bowled over. If any of you are familiar with the medical centre and know about that little strip of restaurants with a little Mexican restaurant that's down, that's gone. That's now just a pile of rubble as the road is being widened in preparation for the new construction phase. So this is a huge opportunity for us. The development we see on this location we think the university can deliver, can catalyze, can attract some $800 million of capital investment on this site. Primarily private capital investment, because the student accommodation, international student accommodation in particular, is a very fruitful industry to be in, but also, of course, commercial and some residential. That will create hundreds to thousands of construction jobs and, of course, long-term jobs, permanent jobs, ongoing jobs, and it will transform those southern suburbs of Adelaide, and I think will transform the university, Flinders University, into the future and prepare us, I think, for a really exciting and dynamic next half-century. I'll stop there, but I'd be delighted to answer or address any comments that any of you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Colin. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. Is there any questions in the room? I might just mention the issue of international students is, I think, a lot more than just the income earned from the international students. The contacts are substantial. I remember when I was, for 10 years, I was president of the Flinders University alumni, and I spent a bit of time travelling internationally, and I remember someone quoting to me that 80% of some of the professional categories in Malaysia were graduates of Australian universities. I went to visit KL and was picked up by the president of the Flinders University alumni in KL, who owned the 6th largest business in Malaysia. His father had been to university in Adelaide. He and his brothers and sisters had all been to university and school in Adelaide. He had his children at school in Adelaide. And you have to say what an opportunity that is for the relationship and the building of investment links and the long-term relationship between countries. I think that's really a terribly important part of the international program that we often forget. Any questions? Stephen.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's very good address, thank you. Two things that occur to me. Firstly, with the number of foreign students coming to Adelaide, to Flinders University of Adelaide, and also to Australia, it creates a real opportunity for us as a country to create advocates for Australia when they return to their home countries, and I think that's probably something that sometimes is missed by a lot of the general public. The other thing is probably a bit of a question, but this week is Entrepreneurs Week, and I was fortunate to go to a presentation on Monday afternoon with Brand SA, where they asked some of their members to go along to that presentation. It was a full afternoon. I know all of the universities in South Australia are involved. I just thought perhaps I'll give you the opportunity to talk a bit about the Flinders University role, because clearly there's some real opportunities there, and I think we tend to forget the role of entrepreneurs, but we only need to think about a place like Silicon Valley to understand they can make a massive difference to what we have seen as, in this country, and certainly in this city, very much a manufacturing base which we know is not under threat, it's actually in serious decline. Thank you.
And I think that's what our New Venture Institute is seeking to do and to develop. And so we have students down there who are developing fantastic, really exciting new ideas, new concepts, new products. There's a couple of young guys who are developing carbon fiber bicycle components and they're working with the university, doing prototyping in silico, using software. We have access, of course, as an institution in our research labs. We have access to the world's best fluid dynamic modeling software. These students are able to prototype their new designs using that software in, frankly, minutes, rather than having to build prototypes to then test them in the real world. They are like pigs in clover, because they are developing their products, developing their ideas, and moving their products along at a really exciting pace, and getting real interest from investors. That, I think, is a really important thing, part of what universities can do, and we're very keen to engage with not just those startup companies, but also small to medium-sized enterprises. And so our NVI, New Venture Institute, is also sending students out to do placements with small companies, where the students then do a project. It might be a business student helping write a business case. It might be an IT student designing a website for a company, for example. But the company gets a real outcome as a consequence, and the students get a real world experience. And of course, they do a project that then we can mark. So everyone wins in the end. And I think it's really creating it's making it easier for those companies to interact with universities. Universities aren't the easiest organizations to interact with. I don't know if any of you have tried, but we're big, we're behemoths. We are slow to move. We're not particularly agile. You try and get a contract out of us, we'll go through 20 iterations of it. By the time you've signed the contract, people get bored with the idea. So for small companies, they don't have time for that. So we've adopted a policy where we're not interested in the IP. We don't want any part of that company's IP. We just want to have our experts, our expertise available to those companies for their benefit. And if that works out, great. If it doesn't work out, great. But of course, my view is that some of those will be very successful, and some of those will probably remember us.
Thank you, Colin. Interested in your about developments with the bicycles. Just wondering, when are they going to produce a bicycle with airbags?
Is that what happened to you, is it? I think they actually do a bicycle helmet with airbags, with an airbag. Yeah.
Very impressed with the way in which what was once the Christian Centre at Flinders is developed as a multicultural, multi-faith centre.
Oasis. Yeah.
And I think that's a very significant development, because it's dealing with the change in the complexion of people coming. And I think credit to the university for what's happening there.
Thank you.